Welcome to another exciting video where we dive deep into one of the most thrilling and unpredictable weekends of the Formula One season. If you're a fan of high-speed drama, unexpected twists, and legendary comebacks, then you're in the right place. But what if I told you that one of the sport's most decorated drivers, Lewis Hamilton, faced an unusual challenge that left both his fans and the entire paddock scratching their heads? This isn't just another race breakdown, it's a story of triumph, struggle, and a few head-scratching moments that could shape the rest of the season for Mercedes. So stay with me till the end, because we're not only unpacking what happened on the track in Baku, but we're also revealing some inside scoops that might make you see this race in a whole new light. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Mercedes race weekend in Baku was anything but predictable. George Russell once again proved that in the world of Formula One, anything can happen. After two rivals ahead of him collided, Russell kept his cool, seizing the opportunity to climb onto the podium. This wasn't the first time he had capitalized on others' misfortune, but this time it felt particularly sweet, as the race was chaotic right from the start. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton found himself grappling with issues far beyond his control. Throughout the weekend, Hamilton was seen struggling to get a grip on his car's performance, and the W15 failed to deliver the results he had hoped for. The seven-time world champion could only manage a meager 2 points for his team, a far cry from the usual dominating performances we're accustomed to seeing from him. What makes this even more intriguing is that Hamilton wasn't entirely caught off guard by the car's lack of pace. According to him, a last-minute modification to one of the car's components threw off the entire setup. This seemingly small change, made just before the race, proved disastrous, leaving Hamilton frustrated and his car difficult to handle during the critical moments of the weekend. As the race progressed, Hamilton's dissatisfaction with the W15 became more and more apparent. What began as a strong weekend quickly turned sour for the British driver. After starting from a respectable position, Hamilton found himself dropping down the order, finishing a frustrating P9 despite all the effort he put in. His disappointment wasn't just limited to his final position. It was clear that something deeper was wrong with the car's setup, and Hamilton wasn't shy about letting his team know. Over the radio, his voice echoed with frustration. At one point, he asked his race engineer in no uncertain terms, "Do you see what I'm forced to drive here?" It was a rhetorical question, but the silence from his team spoke volumes. The tension only grew after the race ended. When Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff jumped on the radio to apologize for the car's performance and congratulate Hamilton for at least scoring some points, Hamilton's response, or lack thereof, was telling. His silence was louder than any words could have been, showing just how deeply the race had affected him. In the post-race debrief, Hamilton didn't hold back his thoughts. He candidly expressed that he knew the race was going to be a struggle the moment that last-minute decision was made. He said, "I had a feeling it would go wrong as soon as we made that call. The car felt good on Friday, but by Saturday things changed. We made minor tweaks, but one of the parts wasn't properly fitted, and it threw off everything." Despite the struggles with the car, Hamilton still entered the race hoping to salvage something from what had become a difficult weekend. Baku's street circuit, with its long straight sections and tight, twisty corners, presented a unique challenge. The long straight offered a prime opportunity for overtaking, especially with the help of DRS, and Hamilton had hoped to take advantage of this to climb up the order, but the car simply didn't respond as he expected. Throughout the race, Hamilton found himself fighting an uphill battle. The medium tires he started with didn't provide the grip he needed, and each lap became more challenging than the last. He was locked in a tough battle with the likes of Haas-Behrman, and while Hamilton is known for his aggressive overtaking moves, this time it was a different story. The car's unbalanced setup forced him to make more aggressive moves than usual, ones he wasn't entirely comfortable with, just to get past slower cars. And even though two cars crashed ahead of him, giving him a slight advantage, it was clear that Hamilton's race was far from what he had hoped for. He voiced his concerns over the team radio, saying, "The balance in this car is one of the worst I've experienced. I had so much front-end grip, but the rear was all over the place. Every corner I had to yank the wheel just to stay on track. And that's not how you should be driving in a race like this." Hamilton's frustration was evident. Despite his legendary skill behind the wheel, even he couldn't overcome the challenges that the car presented. The podium seemed out of reach long before the race ended, and he knew it. As the race wore on, Hamilton's frustrations only grew deeper. He made it clear that the race was essentially over for him before it even began. "I knew it was going to be a disaster as soon as they made that decision last night," he stated, referring to the part change that had thrown off the car's balance. The car felt good on Friday, but come Saturday, the problems started piling up. A part wasn't fitted correctly, and by the time we realized, it was already too late. That minor error set the tone for the entire race. This wasn't just a matter of poor strategy, it was a mechanical issue that could have been avoided. Hamilton explained that during Friday's practice sessions, the car had shown promise. He felt competitive, and there was hope for a strong finish. But the team's decision to make a last-minute adjustment on Saturday threw everything into disarray, and by Sunday, Hamilton was left driving a car that was nearly impossible to control. Adding to the difficulty was the fact that he had to start from the pit lane due to a required engine change. This setback, combined with the poorly balanced car, meant Hamilton's chances of moving up the ranks were slim from the very beginning. He acknowledged that street circuits like Baku are notorious for making overtaking difficult, but with the long straight section, he had hoped to use DRS and slipstreaming to his advantage. However, the car's handling issues made it hard to even get close enough to other drivers for those opportunities. Throughout the race, Hamilton's frustration became increasingly evident as he struggled with one of the worst car balances he had ever experienced. He even went so far as to say, "It was probably the worst balance I've ever had." The W15 felt unpredictable and unstable, with the front end gripping too much while the rear constantly threatened to lose traction. Every time I had to turn, I had to yank the steering wheel to break the front end traction, sliding the car through every corner. It was the strangest way to drive, and I knew overtaking would be nearly impossible. Hamilton's frustration wasn't just about the car's handling, it was also about missed opportunities. In the middle sector, where the corners required precise handling, he found it difficult to maintain the close distance needed to make a move on the straights. By the time he got to the long straight where overtaking was possible, the gap had already grown too wide. This made it almost impossible for him to challenge other drivers, which was a huge disappointment given the strategy he had hoped to employ. Despite his best efforts, Hamilton knew that climbing higher in the ranks wasn't going to happen with the car he had under him that day. His skill could only do so much when the machine was working against him at every turn. While finishing P9 was better than nothing, it was clear to everyone watching and to Hamilton himself that this was far from the result he had envisioned. As the race drew to a close, Hamilton's frustrations were still at their peak, and it was clear that the issues with the W15 weren't just momentary hiccups. He had spent the entire weekend battling a car that simply wouldn't cooperate. When asked by his team about the race performance, Hamilton's responses were blunt and to the point. He made sure they understood just how flawed the car's setup had been. One of the most telling moments came when Hamilton asked his race engineer, "Do you see what I'm forced to drive here?" This rhetorical question underlined how far the team's expectations had fallen. Mercedes had banked on the W15's top speed and consistent pace on hard tires to make a comeback, but the race had shown that these hopes were misplaced. Despite making progress in practice, the weekend's small, seemingly insignificant decisions compounded into a massive problem for Hamilton. To make matters worse, Mercedes had to install a new engine in Hamilton's car, forcing him to start from the pit lane. While Baku's long straight might have given the impression that overtaking would be easy, the car's poor handling combined with starting from the pit lane all but guaranteed that Hamilton wouldn't be able to mount a serious challenge for higher points. The Mercedes team had hoped that their strong performance in free practice would translate into a solid race result. However, the balance issues that Hamilton faced completely derailed any chance he had to make the most of Red Bull's struggles. This left Hamilton fighting not for victory but merely to secure a finish in the points. As the race came to its conclusion, Mercedes' struggles were laid bare for everyone to see. Hamilton's performance, while admirable given the circumstances, was far from what the team had hoped for. They had banked on a strategy that would allow them to capitalize on Red Bull's issues, but Hamilton's difficulties with the W15 made that impossible. Starting from the pit lane was already a setback, but the car's balance issues turned what could have been a salvageable race into a near disaster. Toto Wolff, Mercedes team principal, was realistic about the outcome. After the race, he admitted that while George Russell's podium finish was a positive, it didn't mask the deeper problems within the team. "We're not fooling ourselves," Wolff stated. "Even though we managed a podium, the truth is that we're still struggling. We had 3 teams ahead of us on Sunday, and our pace just wasn't there." Despite inheriting a podium due to the crash between Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez, Wolff was clear that Mercedes still had a long way to go if they were to be truly competitive again. Elaborating on the weekend's events, he said, "Sure, finishing third is better than what we expected, but we have to be honest about where we stand. We need to dig deeper and figure out where things went wrong." Hamilton, on the other hand, wasn't as interested in discussing the positives. His race had been shaped by the struggle to find any kind of pace in the middle of the pack. Throughout the entire second half of the race, he wrestled with a car that felt unpredictable and unbalanced, making it almost impossible to move up the field. Though he managed to score some points, it was clear to everyone that this was a weekend of missed opportunities for the 7-time world champion. While Hamilton was left frustrated, George Russell managed to secure his second podium finish of the season. This time, he claimed third place in Baku, not by outpacing the competition, but by staying out of trouble as chaos unfolded around him. The crash ahead of him between Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez opened the door, and Russell made no mistakes in capitalizing on the opportunity. However, despite the podium, Russell didn't celebrate the result with as much enthusiasm as one might expect. In his post-race interview, Russell reflected on the race, saying that the car was still not performing the way it should. "It was such an odd race. At the start, we were over a second and a half off the pace. But then in the last 20 laps, I found myself faster than Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc, and even closing in on Max Verstappen and Checo Perez. The difference? We switched from medium tires to hard tires, and suddenly the car came alive." Russell expressed frustration at how much the car's performance fluctuated based on tire choice. He explained that for the first half of the race, Mercedes seemed to have no pace at all, but once he switched tires, the car became far more competitive. "It's strange how much our performance changed just by switching compounds. It's not just a Mercedes problem, this is affecting everyone. One session you're quick, and the next you're not, and the only real difference is the tires." Russell's remarks echoed a growing sentiment within the Mercedes camp that they were being held back, not just by their car's design, but by external factors that needed to be addressed. He further added, "It's incredibly frustrating. You've got thousands of people working hard to create the fastest car possible, and then the tires completely change the game, making all that hard work seem futile." Russell's frustration with the tire situation wasn't just a personal gripe, it reflected a larger issue facing the entire Formula One grid. He wasn't alone in noticing how drastically the performance of the car changed with different tire compounds. The difference between the medium and hard tires was so stark that it left many drivers, including Russell, baffled. "It's not just us," Russell explained. "You see it across the board. One session, you're flying, and the next, you're struggling, all because of a change in tire compounds." The unpredictable nature of tire performance has been a source of ongoing debate in the sport. Russell's comments further fueled the discussion about whether more needs to be done to ensure consistency. He elaborated on how the hard tire, which seemed to bring his car to life in the latter stages of the race, turned what was shaping up to be a disastrous day into a podium finish. "It's maddening," he said. "For 20 laps, we were fighting just to stay in the points. And then suddenly, with a tire change, we're challenging the top teams. There has to be something to address here." This wasn't just a matter of performance, but a problem that undermined the work of thousands of people at Mercedes. Russell felt that the inconsistency in tire performance was making the hard work of engineers and mechanics seem irrelevant. "We've got an army of people working day and night to make this car faster, and yet something as simple as a tire compound can throw it all out of balance. It's something we need to have serious discussions about because it's hurting the sport." Toto Wolff, while less outspoken on the tire issue, acknowledged that tire management was an area Mercedes would have to look into if they were to consistently compete with the top teams. He emphasized that while Russell's podium finish was a positive, the team needed to focus on ensuring that they could perform consistently across all races, regardless of the tire compound. As the dust settled on the chaotic weekend in Baku, it became clear that Mercedes had some serious soul-searching to do. While Russell's podium was a bright spot, it didn't mask the underlying issues that had plagued both drivers throughout the race. Hamilton's struggle with the car's balance and the last-minute part change had left him visibly frustrated, and Russell's tire-related challenges only added to the growing list of concerns. Toto Wolff was realistic about the road ahead. He acknowledged that while Mercedes had made progress, they were still far from where they needed to be if they hoped to challenge the top teams like Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren. "We can't let ourselves be fooled by the podium," Wolff said. "Yes, it was a good result, but we have to recognize that our pace wasn't there. There's still a lot of work to do." Wolff's comments reflected a broader understanding within Mercedes that they were still in a transitional phase. The W15 had shown flashes of potential, but consistency was proving elusive. The team's top priority now was to analyze the race weekend in Baku and figure out where improvements could be made, especially in terms of race pace and handling under different tire compounds. Hamilton, meanwhile, remained focused on what lies ahead. Despite his frustrations, he made it clear that he and the team would work tirelessly to resolve the issues that had held them back in Baku. "We've got some upgrades coming," Hamilton said, hinting that Mercedes hadn't shown their full hand yet. "We know we have work to do, but this team never gives up. We'll come back stronger." The key question for Mercedes now is whether they can get on top of their problems before the season slips away. With fierce competition from both Red Bull and Ferrari, time is not on their side. But if there's one thing we've learned from Mercedes, it's that they are a team built on resilience. As they push forward into the rest of the season, the question remains, can they unlock the full potential of the W15 and return to their championship-winning form? And that's a wrap on this intense breakdown of Mercedes' challenging weekend in Baku. It's clear that both Hamilton and Russell are navigating a tough season, but if we know anything about Mercedes, it's that they always find a way to bounce back. The question is, can they pull it off in time to challenge for the top positions this season? What do you think? Will Mercedes overcome their struggles and regain their championship-winning form? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on it. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update on the latest Formula One action. And before you go, check out the video popping up on your screen. Now it's another must-watch if you're following the F1 season closely. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.